Welcome to Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show will have a talk about a Linux project, such as a distribution, desktop environment, or application. We also just chat about the news or any variety of topics from the community. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project. And if you don't know about OpenSUSE, it's a Linux it's a Linux project. It's not really a distribution. With me today is I've got Scrapjaw, I've got Eric, Jinda, Eris, Ben Fitzpatrick, Swift, Adam Grubbs, and Mark. How is everybody?
That's a terrible joke. Terrible joke. You said Swift, Adam Grubbs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right. I did. Well,
sorry.
Sure. Well, I forgot to unmute everybody because I mess things up seemingly every time. So here we go. Well, coming up, we're doing an open mic night. I've got a list of topics already to talk about. We're going to check what's on the menu for next week, do a community free pour with StormOS, do our last call. But first, what have you been doing in Linux or tech or the other way around? Adam, you said you're making Immutable OS images, which is Eric's favorite. So I'm going to enjoy this conversation.
I brought it up just for him.
Excellent.
It's been my whole week just for this. No,
just to tell Eric about it, huh?
Yeah. So there's a project on GitHub that I learned from a guy on YouTube. His name is George Castro. I think he used to work for Canonical on Ubuntu. Just talking about this project called Ublue, and it's basically a way to build Silverblue images using GitHub Actions and OCI, or basically like Docker, but the more standard version of Docker containers. So Silverblue is now set to be able to use these standardized images instead of specialized images. And so you can build the Silverblue image just like you would a Docker container using a container file and all of the normal like containerization stuff you do. So if you've ever gone through and like looked at a Docker file or built one, then it's pretty familiar situation. And they also use GitHub Actions, which is their like CI system built into GitHub. And that is a CI. You can think of a CI system as like a way to instruct a process for building a piece of software or running a deployment or something like that, right? So what it amounts to is there's a series of files in a directory in the repo that basically tell the GitHub Actions runner, which is in this case a Docker container of its own, to then build the image using that runner. I know it all sounds a little crazy and a little bit complex, right? But what the actual end result is that I can go in the Docker or container file, go in there and add in things that I want to add. So like normally, you can layer on packages, and certain packages you want to layer on because like they work directly with the system. Like I have packages that work with my Asus laptop, specifically for the hardware, or something like a Tailscale or a VPN software that needs to be connected to the base system, right? Or something like NVIDIA drivers that need to be built into the system. And so this project allows you to customize that through the container file, as well as starting services or adding repos for extra things, those kind of things in the container file. Then when you commit and push your changes to GitHub, the Actions runner, the GitHub Actions runner, picks up the changes, and then builds an image of Silverblue and publishes it to the GitHub container registry, which you can then use in Silverblue. So after you make your modifications, push to GitHub, it does all this stuff in the background. Then you go into Silverblue and you do one command. It's like rpm-ostree tree rebase, and then you point it to your container. It'll pull down your container, do the deltas and all that, and then you reboot and you're into your custom image. Since you rebased on that custom image, any upgrades you do will track your custom image, not the original one, right? So you'll always get your customizations with the new images. And the way the Actions works is it's set to pull every day. So it builds a new image every morning at 8 in my case. And so every time I reboot my machine or shut it down in the evening, right? And then I boot it back in, I'm getting the new image. So it's a way of keeping up to date, but still having the previous images for rollbacks and stuff, but also with my customization. It even includes a first boot thing that they have where you can have it automatically install certain flat packs or run certain commands and all of that when you boot into the new image.
Wow.
And it's like basically it automates like the whole customization and the key part of it is that if something goes wrong, like say a repo is down or like an update goes bad, it goes bad in the cloud, not on my machine. So I never get the bad bits because if it goes bad up there, it never gets pushed to the registry. So I
Gotcha.
never get the broken stuff.
So does it go through some kind of a QA then when it's being compiled out in the cloud space or something like that it can check to make sure
So like
working?
if there's any kind of error codes, exit codes that are wrong, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
And if it makes a change you didn't like, no problem. Go in there and change it, push it back in, make a new image. It's kind of a way of sort of decoupling the building of it from your end and putting it somewhere else so that you kind of avoid the issue of like breakages on your system. Because like we've had that time where you got like a third party repo that either the GPG key expired or any number of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, so if there's breakages like that or any kind of breakages, they're done up there, not on your machine.
That's pretty wild. So can you then deploy that to multiple machines or does it not work quite like that?
Nope, you can, any machine you want to pull that image for, go ahead.
And so that's a Silverblue. So it's a standard Silverblue setup from your end and then just pulling from your GitHub.
Yep.
Wow.
And there's also a Kinoe or however it's pronounced. And so if you want a KDE version, you can do the same.
Wow.
It's pretty rad.
That is pretty rad.
And it handles all the updates for me. I just shut down my machine at the end of the night. And I boot into the new stuff the next morning.
Pretty crazy. I would have no idea how to go about doing that for myself. I'm sure you just followed a step-by-step guide.
I mean, you got to kind of know some stuff. Like it's not a hand-holdy process, but it's still like it's awesome. Like if you're able to, I'm not sitting here saying like you should all be able to do it or whatever. Like it's totally like uber nerd stuff, but I thought it was cool. And it was awesome to have like my Silverblue image out there. And it's public. It's on my GitHub if you guys want to go check it out. And you can pull the image if you want. If you need Asus Linux laptop stuff in your life, then it's there. But yeah.
That's a very interesting way of potentially building customized images for specific bits of hardware. Yeah. That's pretty wild.
And so, if you have like special drivers you need, and there are versions of it out there with like NVIDIA drivers built in. So instead of building, booting Silverblue, hitting RPM Fusion, installing them and all that, it does all that in the GitHub runner. You just pull it down. You just got drivers. If there's an update to the drivers, it pulls it up for you. You reboot, you got the update.
I wonder what kind of load it's putting on GitHub.
So if it's a public repo, there's like, I think you're limited to something like 2,000 minutes a month. And it takes about 4 to 5 minutes to build an image. So if you multiply that by 30, you're looking at like 600 minutes a month. So you're nowhere near capacity on that.
Especially if you're doing it just once a day.
Right.
You could turn that down to like once every other day or every Monday or something like that.
Correct. But even then, there's no point, right?
Right. I'm just saying, in my mind, if they reduce that, that's still pretty...
Correct, yeah. If suddenly like that becomes an issue, you could, yeah.
Well, I want to
same thing could be done in like a GitLab or some other kind of CI if you wanted, but that's the way they set it up.
Yeah. So I want to welcome Wendy. I saw you earlier today for our Linux Out Loud live stream, so welcome.
Yes. Why, thank you.
Wendy.
So Adam was just telling us about how he's building these crazy Silverblue images with GitHub and then automatically pulling them down in the morning that's customized specific for his hardware. So these are things that are so far above my head that I'm just going to smile and say, cool, awesome, groovy, swell, as a throwback to last week. And
it is swell.
It is pretty swell. And I'm interested in now at this point finding out how long he'll keep doing this method or if he'll find another method. So that's actually.
Definitely.
I mean, I can always just forget about it. It'll keep building images. So
yeah.
I mean, I can always just come back to it later, and I got like up to date stuff. So.
Right. But yeah, that's really wild that you can you can do all that, have it all remote because it's the Silverblue image system, and then pull those things down when they're ready.
Yeah, you just rebase on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which
And
is
actually, the rebasing is solid. Like aside from the cloud stuff, like I rebased on the I'm gonna call it quinoa because I don't know like
Okay.
what else to call it. Anyway, so I rebased on the quinoa because I wanted to try out the latest Plasma, and it was awesome because you've tried to install like GNOME and Plasma next to each other, and like what an absolute disaster that becomes.
It can be, yeah.
And
sure.
so having the separate images makes it like simple because I basically just trade out a GNOME for a KDE version, and if I want to go back, I just trade it out again. And it's like thumbs up, man.
So could you keep
Also,
those
Plasma
images?
527 is amazing.
Yeah, could you keep those images both on the GitHub and then pull them down separately then as
Yep.
needed?
Yeah, just make 2 different repos.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So Adam, Eric, what do you think of this? The way Adam is using the immutable file system for doing this workload.
I think if that's something he finds useful, like if there's enough change on a regular basis, or I don't know, the images provide some sort of utility, or maybe it's just fun to do, then I think that's cool.
I just think they're neat.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think that's really what a lot of this is it's just something that's different, and especially geeky enough that hardcore tech people find it really interesting, for a bunch of reasons that I don't. Yeah.
I think what I find interesting about this is it's now then possible for let's say Adam, who set up his crazy laptop, Asus, I think you said,
Yeah.
with a specific image or customization set that he can then share with somebody else who maybe perhaps gets that exact same laptop and be able to pull his same working image and
Right.
whatnot.
And like a distro maintainer, right? Like they could do the same thing. They can make their custom distro and just distribute it as an image rather than
right
a whole ISO and all this other stuff, right?
So then I wonder if there's maybe other ways like of the non-immutable flavor to do these things. I'm just wondering if there is a way
I have
as
no
cleanly.
idea. I mean, there's like Arch ISO and stuff. Like you can build like Arch ISOs and stuff like that, like custom stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's how like Salient OS was made by Silent Robot and all that. Like you can kind of do that in certain situations. I'm sure there's like Ubuntu tools and other stuff like that. But I find like this is just like the key part of this is not necessarily just building it. It's building it away from my system. That like if it goes bad up there, not bad down here. That's like the biggest part of it.
Right.
Because like the reason I say this is recently RPM Fusion's repos took a dump, and like anyone trying to install Fedora or like update their NVIDIA drive or anything just got errors after errors, and it like screwed a lot of stuff up. And so like if that happens and I go to do an update and it screws up my stuff, it screws up there, not down here.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that would also improve your overall uptime too, because you're not
right.
You're not doing
it's
your
about
updates.
Resiliency.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And it's just neat.
It's neat.
It's swell.
Swell or neat, I think, are both radical ways to
Right, of course.
say these things.
Well, I was telling the group before we started streaming that I tried to install VanillaOS earlier in the week, and it just seemed like it was wanting to like do a lot of stuff up front, like the customization, and then it wanted to reboot a bunch of times, and the package manager being able to install packages from like anywhere. There was a lot of very different paradigms that I guess I wasn't prepared for. So I didn't have a good experience with it. But again, that's a dollar, trying to use a fine tool and just not understanding it. So I'm sure it works great. And the people who get it and probably think it's amazing. And to me, maybe it's just I know how to do things a certain way. And especially whenever I'm just not interested in the geeking out part. Like I'm looking at it from like, could I just use this as a normal person and not care about any of that other stuff? Which is how I kind of feel that Linux is nowadays. Like you install it on a piece of equipment, and most distros, I mean, yeah, there's going to be a learning curve to understand Linux over Windows or Mac or whatever, but like those are pretty minor. And then you're just using a computer. Like you don't have to understand any of these other paradigms and these other processes and systems and stuff like that. And I just felt like by trying it, I had completely stepped out of that realm. This is such a paradigm change, I guess, in my mind. And maybe it isn't as big a deal to other people, but to me, it made it feel very different, and not different in a way that was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. Like, geez, why hasn't it been this way all along? It was different. And I was like, why is this so difficult? Why is this taking so long? What's doing now? You know?
So what if that was
So-
your first paradigm though, right? Like what if a new user goes straight into Immutable and that's the expectation that gets set, right? They might
great,
look
I
at it
guess.
differently. I don't know. This is hypothetical. It's not specifically you, right?
Yeah, no, it's
I'm just
fine.
saying,
And,
like,
and
yeah.
you know, no, I think that's probably perfectly true. Like the whatever you, I mean, I've changed systems a lot over the years. It's not like
Mhm.
I can't understand
Right.
a new. It's not so much that I'm so stuck on the first thing I understood. It's that I was doing
But it's
something
just
different.
that different, right?
What's that different? And I was investing a lot of time, and just literally I couldn't see. The only thing I've heard out of the 2 weeks of discussion we've had on this is what you just said, where I can try different desktops on the same system simultaneously just by switching.
Mhm.
That is literally the only thing that I've thought, wow, that might be interesting. If there was something else I wanted to run, because
Right,
I'm
yeah.
so stuck on GNOME right now. And I will give VanillaOS credit for being, bleeding edge, up to date, and looking absolutely beautiful. That GNOME experience it was notably pretty to me as a GNOME user. Like I thought it was really a very nice like first impression. I love that installer. I love just about everything about the desktop itself. It was the all the stuff that I had to figure out underneath of it just to get to like getting a browser going, getting basic stuff going. So
I'm
You know,
surprised
like
there isn't.
that's actually valid like points though, right? It's not like I don't think a lot of like the distros, especially something like VanillaOS, that's trying to be more approachable, right? I've been in their Discord. They're very like open to feedback, right? And like that is a very good like criticism of like it's not enough to just do something different. Like what is what does it do for me, right? That's kind of what a lot of Windows people look at Linux, right? They're just like,
Mhm.
what am I gaining from moving to this, right? Like how does it actually improve things or whatever? So
right,
because like
and
Linux
we
is such a shift for them, right? Same thing with
yeah,
Mac from Windows or whatever, right?
and I can understand someone having the mindset of Immutable and like being able to see all of those positives, talking to someone like me going, well, just like I would talk to someone using Windows and go, how could you do that?
Yeah,
Like,
how
it's
can
the
you get it,
worst,
like yeah.
yeah, it's the worst way to use a computer possible, but you're doing it. And like,
Right.
so, and I'm sure there's a lot of that. There could be a lot of that same sentiment.
Right.
So,
And the best part is like it's not a monolith, right? It's not like Windows or Mac where it's like we're changing this, just deal with it, right? Like you can just use a normal distro. You can use an immutable distro, and that's awesome, right?
100%. Yeah, no, I think that's what's great is the choice is there. And that's what it takes me back to that original question of who is this for? And I think that eventually it will be for everyone. Like you said, I mean, there are lots of examples where immutable systems work beautifully. We use them every day without thinking about it. But I just think from a desktop perspective, especially trying to bridge the gap between a very like sort of traditional system and then immutable, if you don't have that understanding of like images and containers and
Right.
the package manager to me was really kind of like, okay, I can install packages from all these different distributions, but like, why? And I had the same question before the stream, and Nate's answer was because you can. And it's
Yeah.
I've never been that person.
Well, I guess like in that
Because
case,
you
like
need to-
you could install it from a bunch of different distros, or you could just use Ubuntu. Like you don't have to like use a bunch of containers, right? You could just say apex install blah and just get it from Ubuntu like you normally would. But then your question would be like, well, why don't I just run Ubuntu?
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying is, are there, I mean, and maybe there are, and I'm just not aware of it. And maybe this is more of a developer or sysops kind of thing, but like, is it challenging to run a single distro because there are packages that you're missing? And this is now an advantage because you can reach out and grab these packages that you couldn't get to on your system normally?
I think the key is not just package availability, although that can be key because like, Ubuntu might package a version that's behind Arch or different from Fedora or whatever, right? But I think the key is it's sort of like you said, the kind of paradigm shift of looking at things. Like when you look at these distro box like containers, these Linux container things they do, I look at them as environments rather than a distro, right? So like I'm gonna make a distro box for like Python and development, or I'm gonna make a distro box for all of my OBS streaming stuff, or I'm gonna make a distro box for this or that, right? And that keeps these things separate, much in the same way that Flatpaks keep the individual apps separate. You can look at the distro box containers as keeping entire environments separate, so that you don't have to worry about this OBS has a certain FFmpeg and all this other stuff, but this like Kden Live set might have a different set of tools that would have normally screwed up each other or maybe been hard to maintain or something like that. So if you look at it as like different environments, I think that's the better way to look at it. But that's my cloud native quote unquote like head thinking there. But and like
No,
maybe that's the
actually
intent, but
that's a really great way of explaining that, because I've done that for web servers where I will run different virtual environments for different web servers so that
like
I can
on Apache or something, or
so that I can have a different version of PHP on one or the other,
right.
Or I can do just stuff like that where I'm testing. So I totally get that, and that makes a lot of sense to think of it that way. Does it call out? So like used OBS as an example. If I had OBS installed under Ubuntu and under Arch, is there an easy way for me to see which
when
one?
when you export them with the tool, they actually show up in the menu like OBS on Arch or AUR, whatever Vanilla calls it, or OBS on Ubuntu. And yeah, so there are like two separate ones that with the title specifically saying what they're on. So you can have
and
them separate.
And it keeps, because it's a container, it keeps the configurations completely separate.
Correct. So your home directory is passed in, right? So you can like have your home directory stuff in, but you also, I don't know if AppX allows this, but I know DistroBox like Vanilla does, like Vanilla as in like normal DistroBox. You can actually pass in a separate path as a home folder. So you can have like your normal home folder, and then say you want a separate home environment in another folder on your home on your like system. You can then pass that in as the home of the new environment. So you can have them separate configs and stuff. So there's flexibility. Vanilla is trying to like make it easy to use, like more familiar to people. In that process, you're losing flexibility and power. But normal DistroBox has a lot more options for that kind of thing. But it's obviously a more advanced tool than something like AppX, which does a lot for you.
Yeah, and I think some of that power would be things that might be a little more advanced than, say, stuff I'm going to use on any regular basis. Like, if my use case is separate web servers so that I can develop websites, then that's probably a much more straightforward.
Oh, and to put a cherry on top of this, I also have another repo that automatically builds a DistroBox image that I use for like development. So it's another option. Yeah. Another layer of complexity, but yeah, just having your own like custom DistroBox that you just pass in like dash name, and then you give it a name, and then dash I for the image, and you give it the URL, and it's like, instead of starting a bare container and installing the things I want, I just do that in the cloud and pull down the container. So pretty cool stuff.
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't do those kind of workloads, so I don't know that I would.
Right.
I don't know that I would effectively utilize that power quite right.
Yeah, and it is very much like a, I don't know. I don't think it's like a trying to find a problem for it, for a solution kind of. I can't think of the phrase, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Trying to find
it's a solution looking for a problem. Yeah, that's it.
It's an Eric statement. A solution trying to find a problem.
I don't think it's that. I think it's that people who don't have the problem are looking at the wrong solution. Like Eric said, what's the point in like what does he get out of it that he couldn't just get out of his normal machine? And that
Yeah.
to me tells me not like you're doing it wrong, Eric. What is wrong with you? It's more about like, I guess it's just not for you.
Yeah.
And like some people get like the FOMO and they're like, what do you mean it's not for me? It's just for you, not me, you know? And they get
Right.
all upset about it. But it's like, no, it's not for everyone.
Well, but that's been true of any Linux distribution. I mean, there are plenty that I I just don't want to take the time to set up and learn and deal with, and the maintenance. And I mean, that's the thing. The power, just like with KDE, right? I mean, the power comes in the configurability, and all of that configuration is great if you need it.
Right.
But when you don't need it, it just gets in your way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, maybe VanillaOS is onto something there where they're just they're trying to give people like all of the advantage of a immutable system, but still make it, an easier thing
More
to
approachable.
use. Yeah. And I'm going to keep coming at it and, and see, how that works. Cause it's really the container thing. That's just what it comes down to. Like I worked in IT up until the point that, virtualization was the standard. And then as I got, not pushed out, but I basically had to leave that. And then that's when all of the containerization stuff came in. And so
Right.
I just, I understand it, but I don't do it. And I haven't done it in practice enough to really kind of get all
To
the
have that
nuances
eureka
and-
moment of like, oh, I
Yeah.
get it. Right. Yeah.
Right. To just be like, oh, well, why would I ever do it any other way? Because this is just so much smarter, easier, straightforward, blah, blah, blah,
Right. And then everybody wonders why I'm sitting here pitching a tent over, stuff. But like, I get it. Right.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Why don't you get it, Eric?
My dumb, thick head,
Way to go,
and it
man.
is, it's funny you say that, like, well, why is it for you and not for me? Because there is definitely, it's not FOMO, but it's like
It's like, are you saying I can't figure this out? Are you, like
Well,
you
the
feel
example-
insulted?
part of this example I gave before we started streaming, this is out of frustration more than anything, but you have a friend or a family member or somebody who says, you've got to see this movie. It's the best movie you've ever seen. You can't live another day on this planet without seeing this movie. And then you go see the movie and you're like, it really wasn't that good.
I don't get it.
Yeah. And that's kind of how, like, you're excited about it. I've seen so many people like get interested and excited about it. And then I try it and I'm like, okay, if you say so.
Right.
But I think I'm not, you're right. I haven't hit that situation where it's like, oh, okay, now, and that just comes with using it. And
Right.
to
It's
be
like listening
fair-
to like a Flaming Lips album and you're just like, I don't get it. But then you got to listen to like 3/4 time at like, and
That's
then you'll
right.
eventually get it. Right. Yeah.
yeah. And that's a good example. Flaming Lips did take a while to grow on me, but
Right.
now I
Yeah.
like them. So
So, just keep at the immutable stuff. Your lips will flame.
there you go. That needs to be a soundbite somewhere. Well, thank you for taking the time to educate us, because
Yeah.
That's
and if
always-
anyone has questions, I'm more than happy to answer. But if you don't
Okay.
get it, then that's fine. You don't have to. Like it really does happen. For me, it was like I didn't get containerization for a while. And then like at some point I just had like, I can't even remember now, but like I just had like some eureka moment where I was like, I get it now. And then like it was like I can't see anything in like a different light. Like I have this like weird like containerized cloud native like weird viewpoint now. And it's like it sucks, right? Because not everything fits into that paradigm. And you find sometimes you're like trying to fit things into that paradigm that were never meant to, and you're like, nah, I gotta slow
Right.
my roll. This isn't working, right? Yeah.
Right.
Like I gotta do this the old way,
Yeah.
well, professionally, I think it's been a big win for you to understand it, to have taken that time to be able to bring that as a solution, to say like, we have to roll out this new, service or system or something. And like, we can do it in a way that makes this a lot easier to do and to manage and
Yeah.
upgrade and like all those things, it's safer, it's more secure, it's easier to, all the things. And like that is a powerful sort of toolbox. And as you've said, we've had conversations where you've said you were so far above what like the other people understood that you had to actually train people to kind of
Right,
get them
yeah.
to understand why you're saying like, this is what we need to do.
Right. And
So-
then like then I feel like I'm talking like we're talking where it's like they're like, they don't get it. It's not that they're against it. They're just like, I don't understand what you're on about. And I'm like, look, man, when a man loves a woman, like you just have to start like at the very base. And like, yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
it's just, yeah, that whole thing.
Well, cool. Thank you I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's neat. Neat, Adam.
That was a swell conversation.
It
Enjoy.
was. All right, if you have not done the straw poll yet, it's in the chat. It's is Wayland ready? If not, when? It's a one question poll. So go ahead and do that real quick while I stall a little bit before I kick it off to Eris.
So for the poll, the number one answer was Wayland needs a few more years to be ready. And that got, oh, people are voting. So it switched. The number one answer, I guess, is Wayland Revolution is now, 26%.
Awesome.
And that got tied with Wayland needs a few more years to be ready, 26%. The third response is Wayland needs months to be ready. That's 20%. Wayland needs 5 years or more to be ready. That's 9%. Other got 9%. Tux Penguin got 9%. And Wayland needs 10 years or more to be ready, 3%. As far as replies, I had a few replies. First one, to determine if it's ready yet largely depends on the graphics card you are using. If you are using Intel or AMD, aside from compatibility with other software, it is pretty much there. If you are using NVIDIA, it all depends on how many hoops you want to jump through. If the distro didn't jump through the hoops for you. And then somebody replied to me mostly ... And then they provided me with a link, which I'll put in the YouTube chat. And it is to the website, Are We Wayland Yet? There you can check out the different features, if they've been added to Wayland and what's still missing, and some caveats. And as I replied to the person who gave me this link, life is all about the caveats. Because people asked about NVIDIA. What about NVIDIA? What about other things? I forgot what other things they said.
There's some things missing on that Wayland list.
Yeah.
So
limitations, caveats runs in Kitty. Limitations, caveats, it runs in GNOME. When using Nouveau driver, it runs in Sway and WL roots / WL roots. I got another reply said, interesting poll. I chose Wayland needs months to be ready, not from personal experience, but from what I've been reading from others. I debated between months and a few more years, but I think for most people, months would be more correct, while a few more years would be for more advanced features. And another reply was, I voted for ready, now based on my experience with OpenSUSE MicroOS. I'm not the most demanding user of my systems. Office applications, containers for terminal applications, Flatpaks for graphical, no issues as yet. Touch wood. And another
that
reply
wasn't me,
is,
by the way. That was not me.
and that reply was other. I think it's ready in some use cases and implementation, but not others. For example, I had a lot of trouble with random freezing, crashing in Wayland Kitty sessions. While everything worked well under X11 sessions, GNOME, on the other hand, seemed to not have those issues. I'm sure there's also specific applications that may have trouble with Wayland functioning correctly, I'm guessing. And the final reply was other. Wayland will never be ready, but that won't stop, and hasn't, its adoption.
Well, I mean, what's ready if you're going to do that game, everything's always evolving. Like nobody can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So I mean, ready meaning you can use it.
I think
Is
using
it perfect?
I think using it without any significant encumbrance. That'd be how I view it.
Okay,
So
that's fair.
like if I use it and I know that I'm using Wayland, like there's something like I notice a difference and it's inhibiting me from accomplishing what I want to accomplish, then that's a problem. If it works and there are no issues, like there's nothing like inhibiting me and I don't even know I'm running Wayland, then it's running great.
Yeah.
So I actually ran Wayland for quite a while, and I had many troubles with it. And what was actually the killer for me was all of a sudden after an update, Plasma would crash in such a way that all my applications would go away, and then the desktop was still there, kind of, but almost like a shell of itself. No, Plasma Shell was a shell of itself. It wouldn't actually. I couldn't launch applications. I couldn't restart the system without having to hard shut it down. And so that actually, when I started losing work, that's when I said Wayland isn't ready.
You know, I've run Wayland without knowing it in testing testing distros and stuff where Wayland is the default. And I will be able to do all the normal things that I need to do until all of a sudden something like I'll try to use a keyboard shortcut or there's something that isn't working. That's when I'm like, oh, I'm on Wayland. Like, you know, there's still those little things that catch you up, but for the most part, like I couldn't tell the difference. Like, I think the list, the poll, you know, Wayland itself is ready in a lot of ways. There's still software that I use that isn't ready for Wayland, so that's a limitation for me. So it's not just Wayland. It's it's more than just that. And their stance on NVIDIA, I mean, you got to be realistic, man. NVIDIA it's out there, and I get it. It's harder to deal with. It's even impossible in some cases, but anyway, I don't like this whole, well, it's Wayland, or I'm sorry, it's NVIDIA, so we just can't, oops, oh well, get a different video card, ha ha ha, like, no, that's not gonna happen. So
the application that is kind of a bummer that doesn't work is called Barrier or Synergy, where I can use let's say a virtual KVM, so I can, like right now, I can take my mouse and go from this computer to the one next to me, and then I can go back and forth. I can't do that in Wayland. Supposedly there was a fix coming real soon. That was a year ago, and it hasn't arrived yet. So I don't know what's holding it up. But there's like a lot of little issues for me. I mean, if I were not doing things like video editing using Zoom or wanting to use multiple machines from a single interface, then it would be great. But because like using and maybe there's a better video editor than Kdenlive to use with Wayland, but my issue is that it would just chug down to like a unusable levels of slowness, and it's just faster in X11. So, and I don't know if that's a Plasma issue or if that's a Qt issue or where that is, but that is certainly an issue, and it was quite painful.
And so for you as an end user, that's a problem because you don't even know who to report it to. All you know is that something you're trying to do doesn't work. And it's very easy then to say, well, I'm using Wayland, so it's got to be Wayland. We don't know that. Like you said, it could be Qt. But I think, I don't know. There have been a lot of times where I've been pretty hard on Wayland. I've been like, well, it's been, the better part of 2 decades, but I really feel like they have pushed hard to make it usable by our definition here. Right.
Right.
And there are genuine advantages to using it. I just feel there's just those little things left for me in particular that keep me from using it. And I have NVIDIA. All my computers have NVIDIA.
Also, if you plan on using VirtualBox, which I know, why use VirtualBox? You can use something else. Then you're not going to use Wayland either. And libvirt manager is dodgy sometimes with its virtual hosts on Wayland as well. So yeah, there's just a lot of little things.
Does that depend on your video card?
I'm using Intel.
Just Wayland? Okay.
So I'm using the vanillaest of vanilla graphics driving hardware. Oh, and also dragging and dropping files. That would also go crazy on me as well. I have a little article I did earlier in January on it, which I think I talked about on Linux Out Loud, and I think I talked about here as well.
But is that KDE or is that Plasma?
Sure. I don't run GNOME because I'd put a a large heavy object through my monitor if I ran GNOME. So I can't, for the sake of the longevity of my hardware, I can't run GNOME.
Yeah. I feel the same way about Plasma. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's fine.
You know, I booted up an old hard drive that has KDE, the 1604 Ubuntu base on it, because it's got a bunch of recording stuff on it, and it ran like total dog crap on my laptop. I didn't realize that was that drive. I just, there's a spot in my laptop. I'm going to get that drive and throw it in there, and then I realized, there's an entry in there in Grub for that. All right. I booted it up. Wayland ran completely just sluggard on it, but I changed it over to X11. I was like, yeah, it's come a long way from 1604. So there's still some hiccups, but I tell you what, it hated everything when I booted it up the first time.
So I'd like to say also that back in 2012, I was having some issues with this display link system, like USB. You can output a video off the USB. I wanted a third monitor on a laptop, and I was told I had to do all these like fancy xrand commands to make the whole thing work. And they said, don't worry, next year when X is replaced by Wayland, I mean this is 2012, it's all going to work flawlessly. So that didn't happen, but I appreciate his enthusiasm.
Yeah. And it's okay. They have to be optimistic. That's a tough position to be in. Imagine how much guff they're getting from everyone. You gotta have some thick skin but I think ultimately they're doing it because they have to, because X just, is becoming unmaintainable according to the developers. And there are a lot of new things that Wayland does that X can't really do. I mean, I guess technically it could, but the amount of effort it would take.
So I'm about to throw mine. Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I was gonna say it is the future. Whether we like it or not, I don't think Wayland's not coming.
I was gonna throw my fuel on the fire and say like, I will not run X again. Flat out. It's like, now that I have hardware that's not NVIDIA, X is just, no, it's not an option. It's X Wayland. That's the closest I'm getting. Because like, I loaded up, Plasma 527 with Wayland, and it's like, oh, you have high DPI screens? Here's the 150% scaling, just automatically. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. Don't give me 100 where I got to bust out the microscope, and don't give me 200 where you think I need a Fisher-Price toy, right? Like, that just worked, right? FreeSync just worked. Like, if there's like a setting in there, adaptive sync, yeah, sure, thanks, right? Awesome. That's there. Now, yeah, there are some pain points. I would love to share my screen on Discord. Is that Wayland or Discord's fault? We'll see. But like I'd like to blame Discord, but I can't, right? Because people on X don't have that problem, right?
Right.
But like, it's like there are facilities for that, right? There's Pipewire and stuff that do work under Wayland, and there are things like OBS that do work with Pipewire. So in a way, it's like, hey, Discord, how about you get on this Pipewire thing? Same looking at you, Zoom, looking at a lot of things, right? But I understand they're like, who uses Linux, right? And so they're not really that worried about it. But man, I can't go back. The window manager is smooth, the performance is great, the scaling is there. Like it's awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Screen sharing might work on Discord, but the audio doesn't come through when you stream on Discord still. I'm on X11 with Pipewire. You have to you have to pipe your audio through where your microphone goes in, but then anyone not watching the stream hears all of it. It's a dirty workaround.
So it's not great. So maybe it is Discord in that case, but still, like the point is like I think Wayland is awesome, and like I don't think it's like 100% there, right? There are the edge cases. There are even some like pretty severe edge cases, like Nate said. Like, yeah, I've seen that. Caden Live, like it's a dog in Wayland. I don't get it. I don't know why. It just is. And I have AMD hardware, not Intel. But like, yeah, it's like it's not quite there, but damn, it's there, right?
Yep.
It's like, we're sitting there, none of us complain about not having Adobe or Microsoft Office or whatever. It's kind of that with me, right? It's like, yeah, Linux doesn't have everything, but it's got everything I want.
Mhm.
And Wayland doesn't support everything, but it supports what I want.
And
Yep,
actually,
and like-
on certain machines, I do have Wayland going because it's just not a problem on those machines. Also running Plasma, but they're not doing
Right.
certain workloads. So I think it's close. I think it's a few months away. I've been saying that for several months now, but I think it's we're just on the cusp of it. Just a few little bits that got to be tweaked out. And
It's real
and
close.
I do agree though, like the smoothness. Again, we're not doing those other things like the compositor and how smooth that behaves, like in Plasma. I can only speak for Plasma. It was just so buttery smooth. It's amazing how nice it is. It's just those other just little workloads that
Yeah.
just cause the whole thing to come crashing down, and that's my problem.
You're so right. I mean, when the
It's
times
just
that I've
another
been-
tint. It's another one of my tents I'm pitching. Just put it that way. I'll leave you alone.
And on that note, no, I had a hard time believing, like to Scrap's point, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, it's become each year a little bit more real when things can actually work and things, it's like I can have a desktop session that it took me until I tried to hit a key combination or something basic like that, like I didn't even know other than, and I agree with Nate, like the compositor was much smoother and
Mhm.
I hadn't noticed it at the time, but then if I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that actually opening things up and all of that was like really smooth. It's like a higher frame rate or something, it just it feels different. So you're absolutely right, Nate. Like right now, it's easy to look at it and actually have faith and believe like it is very close.
And I think I really want it to be for numerous reasons, because I think it does have a lower, like on a laptop doing basic tasks and whatever else, it does use less power. There's less bloat in the display system, so it actually operates much more efficiently than than its X counterpart. Yeah, but when you have a lot of memory, I guess it really doesn't matter. And the security holes, and there's a myriad of other reasons too. Is anybody here running Wayland full time now besides Adam?
No, I am not, Nate.
Oh, come on, guys. Are you kidding me?
Well,
None of you?
no. Well, I would be, but I'm a gamer and I also have I use Discord screen sharing a lot, Adam. So
I thought you guys were my friend. I see who my friends are.
They don't
Well-
dislike you because they don't run Wayland, but part of the reason that I haven't been using it is all of the problems that Nate has had, and I also run Plasma. It's my one and only love when it comes to desktop environments. So unless it'll work smoothly with the things that I need to do, it's not ready for me.
exactly.
I get it. It's fine. I'll go run Wayland way over there with my other friends. Thanks.
Listen,
That's
why don't-
okay.
why don't you
I'll still give you a hug. It's all right. You're still my friend.
Yeah.
But
why don't you
Just
go
for
get
a
an
run.
immutable?
Wayland with you.
Yeah, I think you should go get an immutable system and you go over there and you run Wayland on it, and then you can tell us how amazing it is.
I'm just telling you, man. If it's immutable, it's always Wayland. You can't change it. It's always Wayland.
You're stuck.
Well, I'm over here on XFCE and it's not Wayland ready yet, and I don't know when it will be, but they said it's coming in 4.20, but that's that's a long ways off, so it's all right. I'm personally in no hurry to run Wayland.
I forget
Wasn't it-
XFCE is a thing, so I don't really think about that.
Weren't they gonna? Wasn't their development schedule? I thought their release schedule was gonna be more, more quick.
Well, they
More
are
frequently.
Yeah. Well, at least on more bleeding edge, this was like Arch and Gen 2, they already have packages pointing to 4.19 already, but if you're somebody who's production work or something like that, I do not suggest updating to that bleeding edge testing stuff.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And and even in the 4.19 testing builds of XFCE, I have not seen anything pointing to the Wayland compositor yet at all. For the Wayland back.
I didn't know there was such thing as bleeding edge XFCE.
Well, I have noticed that, the 4.19 packages are starting to trickle down from upstream, but they're not 100% yet, Nate. So at least from my understanding, so I would say that, they are slowly going toward Wayland, but I don't know an exact release time frame for 4.20 right now. So, because they just a few months ago released 4.18, which is still right now supporting only Xorg. So yeah.
Gotcha. Is anybody here running XFCE besides Ben? Jinda, Mark? Now, why do you run XFCE? Like, what's...
because the reason is, I was a GNOME 2 lover way back in the day of the old Ubuntu's and other older systems, and I did try KDE4 for a little bit, not long term, and I liked it, but there was just so much customizability, so much this and that, and it didn't really play well on the hardware that I had at the time, and hence I looked for something different when GNOME 2 went away, and I was very kind of disappointed in that. And no offense to GNOME 3 or GNOME 40 or whatever they call it these days, but and I don't dislike Plasma, but it's just not my desktop of choice personally. So, I do give them a lot of credit, but I've used XFCE so long that I started using it back after like I said, the GNOME 2 era ended, and I just fell in love with it ever since, because you could make it look like anything you really want in any manner that you want. And having tried so many different variations of XFCE's customizability, I just can't pull away from it, to be honest. And the way I usually set it up is I have a panel at the top with all my launchers, all my etc., all my applets, and then at the bottom I have the dock-like plugin, which I kind of set it up kind of like the Mac has, with the panel at the top, the dock at the bottom, and that to me makes sense, because I just love that kind of layout without having to run the Mac OS, and it really is a killer desktop look to me, no matter if I'm running a light theme, a dark theme, anything like that. And that's really kind of the way I like to run XFCE. It's not for everybody, but that's just the way I like to run it. So yeah. And in a future StormOS update, I might be actually shipping it that way. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's just kind of why I like the XFCEs, because I can make it look how I want with a minimal amount of effort.
So I missed from Mark. You said wish you'd given a basic explanation of Wayland and what it is and how to tell if it's active, if not an app, etc. So have you run into this before, like on the Linux, the Atlanta Linux enthusiast group, about the Wayland, if they're running it or not?
Well, we just have, there's so many different interests in Linux, in Linux users. There's hobbyists, there's programmers, there's, enterprise folks. And, it's just, people may not understand what Wayland is. I wish we would have kind of given an intro, but because it's not really visible, right? There's no, you can't just look and see, hey, I'm rolling Wayland or not,
There might be an easy way for them to see if your desktop environment has an about system window.
You can also
then
just in the
it'll
terminal.
usually tell you if you're running X11 or Wayland. So that's an easy way for most users to figure out what they're running from a quick glance.
So if you run,
it's pretty easy if you like switch back and forth, right? Like if they try Wayland versus X, they'll realize like.
But if
X
they don't
sucks,
know they're
but,
on Wayland, then how do they know that if
Yeah.
it's
And how do you know how
if they're saying I can't,
switch?
yeah,
Right.
this keyboard shortcut you keep telling me to use, it doesn't work, and you're going,
Right.
well, of course it works,
Right.
until you realize, oh, and yeah, Mark, maybe that is an easier way than what I sent you. And if not, you'd think someone would maybe just make a little utility that you can run and have it be like yes or no, you know.
So if you in terminal, I put it in the chat in YouTube as well as in the Zoom chat. It's a echo $XDG session type with underscores, and that'll tell you if it's
And that's
X11 or
helpful.
Wayland.
I think that's helpful. That can add to the conversation.
Mhm.
You know, people watching this stream can do a little echo and then and say, oh, I am running a Wayland or I'm not, you know.
Just
Yeah,
have it in like
so
a
in-
welcome screen, right? Like, do you want to run a good compositor or a bad one? And like, it's,
By the
you know,
way, you're
and
not
then if they
running
if they choose bad, give them Wayland anyway.
By the way, did you know this isn't an immutable operating system? No, and under GNOME, under the About section, there is all the way at the bottom almost, it's windowing system. And mine says X11. So
Well, there you go. And you can choose when you go to log in if it's not set to auto login. If not, you can log out and then change it and log back in.
don't some of them make you install the X session now? I think I've seen that where it was like Wayland was the only choice, and then you had to manually install X.
was-
Maybe I'm
That might have been like Fedora or Ubuntu at one point in time, like 4 years ago or so.
I think it's there for like fallback purposes, right?
The LXQT about doesn't seem to tell you anything. Well, look at the XFCE about.
I think only if you run kwin and lxqt will it run. Can you run Wayland? You have to specifically set that up as such. So it takes a little massaging, but you can make it happen.
And you know, there are certain desktops like Plasma who are trying to like help with that barrier. Like, obviously, you know, you got to dig in the settings. I'm just not even get into that. Point is, Eric mentioned like keyboard shortcuts. The latest Plasma has a setting in there, right, for X compatibility. That if it's an X Wayland app, you can give it access to your Control, Shift, Alt, and all of that for your keyboard shortcuts, so that those keyboard shortcuts work properly while you're under the Wayland session. Same thing with system scaling, like graphic scaling. You can have as like if an app doesn't scale by default, you can have the system scale it. Or if you have apps that like scale just fine, you can let them scale themselves. And so like to avoid like the blurriness and stuff, right? So there's like efforts to kind of bridge these gaps already. It's just right now it's bleeding edge, but in like, you know, a few years it might just be the norm, right? Or maybe not even that long.
I think it will. Absolutely. Yep. And even if it has to be like, oh, you're on NVIDIA, tough, you know.
All right, yeah.
But no, I think that that's the writing on the wall. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like just everybody's like, well, from the compositor folks like kwin and all and Mutter to the desktops themselves building in tools to get around it, or like settings to get around things, or you know, even just drivers and other things just improving, you know, like it's getting there. And I don't know, many distros do it by default, right? Like Ubuntu,
Yeah.
Fedora, many of
Yeah,
them
they
default
do.
to Wayland. So it's like
not for me because I'm on NVIDIA, but if I
Right.
use a virtual machine, almost every desktop, it defaults to Wayland now when
Yeah.
I'm doing a VM, for example.
right. I mean, they know you're a lower class citizen, but that's why they're saving you from yourself, Eric. Come on. No,
Exactly.
but really, they are kind of doing that, right? By like, look, it's not going to work, right? Let's give you the thing it's going to work with. But
Well, there
No,
have been
like-
some changes in the NVIDIA. Like they've open sourced some things so that I think the future for Wayland on NVIDIA seems like
Right.
it's you know, there's a light at the end of the tunnel there. It's probably not a train, but there's definitely a light that you can see that there's work being
There's a
done in
path
that direction.
forward, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
it's going to get there.
takes time. It's just like, I mean, anybody who's worked in IT for any amount of time, they're familiar with that project that's like always 6 months out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So like one of the tools I heavily rely upon is XRDP, you know, remote desktop.
Right.
Is that something that Wayland's just not going to support because it's X Windows?
I think the solution to that is get a better RDP client. But
Is there a way? Is there?
No, really, I feel like that is actually the answer, though. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not. I was being facetious, but I really feel like that's kind of the Wayland folks' answer. It's like you should probably move to a better, like more Wayland friendly thing, right? Otherwise, it'll just run an X Wayland, right? And like X Wayland's kind of just there because it has to be there. But I really feel like if you were to ask like Wayland folks, and especially GNOME folks, they're just gonna tell you like, just use Remina, just use like connections or whatever, use something else. But yeah, I really feel like that's the answer that everyone would give you.
Well, XRDP is a server piece.
Right, yeah.
So is there?
But I'm saying
is
that's
there
what they would probably tell you. Like, you need to run things that plug into Wayland. It's a stupid answer. I'm with you. Like that face,
Yeah.
I feel you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what they're
So
gonna tell you.
if the answer is use VNC because VNC supported.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I feel like that
I'm not
answer,
gonna go for
if that's the answer they would give, isn't really an answer. It's basically telling you to go fly a kite. We really don't care because
Right.
it doesn't
But
work with what we have.
it's also they're not X developers, right?
Well, and
So-
I get that. I absolutely get that. But to tell somebody that, this is what I rely on, am I going to have the ability to move to Wayland? It would be better to just give the answer of
There's a
politely
Wayland
no,
version.
not if
But
you're
yeah,
going
but if
to
there's a
use
Wayland
that.
version, right? Like that's the more of the point. Not like leave your old crap because it sucks, but it's like, hey, here's a WRDP, right? Why don't you use this instead? Right?
Is that available? Is WRDP available?
Right. That's the
No.
sort of teething point we're at right now, right?
Right.
But that would be the answer. It's like, well, yes and no, so to speak, right? And yeah, because like remote desktop in Wayland's a bit of a mess right now. Like last I checked, at least. But
It's not even a mess. It's non-existent, right?
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
no,
It's out-
it does exist, but it's not great.
I mean, on the wayland.freedesktop.org site, I'm reading like, is Wayland network transparent? Does it support remote rendering? No, this is outside the scope of Wayland. To support remote rendering, you need to define a rendering API, which is something I've been very careful to avoid doing.
Right. And
I
that's
mean, it
what
just
the
keeps
GNOME
going.
team has done with their remote desktop thing built into GNOME. They've
Right.
kind of built their own thing rather than relying on like a server side, so to speak. It's not up to Wayland to do that. You have to build that on top, kind of thing.
Right.
So my understanding, GNOME is using like a forked of XRDP though.
Yeah, but to support Wayland, right?
And then I'm actually trying to advocate the GNOME people to, really make a little more nuanced design decisions about how to access, because you got virtualized access and you got like, as if you're right in front of the machine using the actual monitor.
Right.
And that's like another nuanced thing that some people, more and more for security reasons, it's better to go virtualized. But like, there are some use cases where you got to have like a 1-for-1, what's in front of the screen for like support services, and it's where Linux users are still stuck.
Right,
on
but
that
why are we not thinking of this as like an ISV problem rather than a platform problem? Like why do we think of it as it has to be a Wayland or a GNOME or whoever solving the problem? Why
Yeah.
There's plenty of room for an ISV or like a any kind of project to come in and build that thing. And like it's kind of like the whole like let's make teachers teach everything to our kids and the parents do nothing kind of thing, right? It's like, why are we like putting this all on Wayland and all on GNOME? Like some of these things should be handled by like further up the stack. And
I agree, but to what what was just read, they're literally avoiding it. They're calling it out of scope.
yeah, because like then it would like it's feature
It's like-
creep at that point. It's a scope creep because like you end up with like how much do the Wayland guys have to build themselves, and then you end up with X where you have this huge
Yeah.
monolithic thing, and like the Wayland developers seem to want to keep things a little more technically simple, if you get what I mean. Like instead
Okay,
of
so X is a bit of
building
a
out
cluster,
everything.
and they're trying to keep Wayland not a cluster, but at the same time, now we have holes that need to be filled, and then you have to have developers who have time in order to fill those
Yeah.
holes to make Wayland work.
Yeah, and then you're
Right.
gonna have,
welcome to open source.
and then you're gonna have, and this is where we kind of are with like portals with FlatHub and Flatpaks, where it's like Plasma is going to solve it this way, and GNOME is going to solve it their way, and then look, we have more
Right.
fragmentation, and whereas Wayland even if they don't, because people always say, well, Wayland's really a protocol. Wayland's really a protocol. Well, give us a protocol for remote access then. Not that you have to build it, but give us something we can at least hook into.
Right.
And of course, it's me, like a know-nothing developer who doesn't do any of this. But, we can't, like, at the same time, like, people talk about Wayland adoption and, like, people should be using Wayland. It's like, well, there is some give and take on, like, making it convenient for developers to build those tools. And
Right.
if the guy is saying I'm avoiding it on purpose, well, that's not really encouraging. So I'm not going to go and waste my time and build something if the guy is going to say, nope, out of scope, and then you're still stuck. That's kind of a waste of time.
I don't think that argument holds water at all. Like why like that's like I'm gonna build an app on top of a platform, but like the platform has to do like 90% of the work, and all I'm gonna do is make a few API calls and build a pretty front end.
I think
That's
think
a little
it
excessive, right?
is excessive, but the reason that everybody thinks and works that way is because X has supported it for so long. And so when you think about remote desktop access on a Linux system, because X was always part of that, they've relied on it. Like I use AnyDesk a lot for remote support, and their help FAQ is, caution, please keep in mind that Wayland sessions are not supported. Please make sure an Xorg session is running for incoming sessions. So, they're not supporting it. They could create something else, but will they? And
Right.
when will they? Like,
Correct.
So, and that's a major provider of remote desktop, access. And so, and it's not RDP, and it's not, they're using X. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. It doesn't seem like it's fair, but because that's the way it's been for
That's the
such a long
expectation.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But it's the
Well,
same
at
way.
least-
It's the same reason they don't
Well-
build bespoke things to adhere to NVIDIA, right? Because like then you have the issue of like, oh well, now we have to build it for this guy and this guy and this
Yeah.
guy, and you end up with this
Right.
huge, massive like code base that's like got just bespoke things for every little. Like now we have to build something for Razer mice and keyboards, and now we have to build something for
Yeah.
this and that, right? And like,
I get where you're saying.
Yeah.
I definitely get where you're coming from, because it can be a never-ending story if you're constantly building for somebody else. But for the rest of us not on Wayland or choosing not to move to Wayland, it's because we're using what works for us and what we
Right.
need. Lego right now does an amazing job on their hubs providing stuff for Scratch code, and Python's there, but really they don't care. So there's a whole bunch of functionalities that Python can do that Lego doesn't allow you to do on their hubs. So what do? We're going to move to something else that allows the hub, the robotics, the functionality that I want. This is the functionality I need, so I'm going to stick with X. And Wayland can do its happy thing, and it can move forward, and it can do some amazing stuff. Not talking down on that project in general. It's overall, what is the correct tool for the job? And right now, for many of us, X is still the correct tool.
there's plenty of room in my tent for Wayland.
And one last thing I'll say too about this is like, and this goes back to like more of a marketing communications. If you look at a lot of the Wayland dev talks from like 2012, 2013, I think it was, or maybe a little later. And they were always talking about replacing X, and we've got to get rid of X, and here's why, and replacing X. And Wayland, this is the way for Wayland. But then it's like, you're saying going to replace it. There's obviously it's not going to be one-for-one replacement, but that's kind of again, going back to expectations and communication, it's like, it's kind of embedded that people need to remote access things. And I just feel like it could be a little more encouraging to say it's out of scope. How about, well, if someone steps up, we will partner with them if we find the partnership is right. How about that language instead of just saying no?
Right.
Well,
I as far as like the remote access goes, right? Since we're speaking on that paradigm here, like it's the thing of like, do we have to do it the way we've always done it? I look at a project like Parsec that basically uses video encoding. It's way more bandwidth than like a normal RDP. I get that, but like it's a different way of handling that problem where you get like smooth animation. You don't have to worry about the usual RDP stuff. You can use your GPU acceleration and all that over that stream, over that remote, and like that kind of thing could be done with like existing Pipewire tools, right? And so like maybe the issue isn't so much that Wayland needs to build in a replacement for XRDP, but that the users of Wayland need new tools that do things differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, that same paragraph or the same section I was reading from freedesktop.org. As of 2020, there are several projects that use these methods to provide GUI access to remote computers. Compositor Weston provides an RDP backend. GNOME has a remote desktop server that supports VNC. WayVNC is a VNC server that works with compositors like Sway. So there are different ways to achieve it. And I agree that taking the time to build all of these things into Wayland is counterproductive, because even if you build it in, somebody's going to say, well, you need to build this in because I need to do this. And then you need to do it. It's good. Like you said, feature creep. It's just never going to end. And, if we complain that it's Wayland's taken this long, already,
Right.
and we keep dumping more stuff on top of it, it just makes it more difficult. So,
and in the end, you get Duke Nukem Forever, right? So
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
I want to welcome
Wayland run on a toaster.
I want to welcome Steve's very own and Emily to the stream. I don't know if I welcome Prophetic, but he already spoke. So hi, Prophetic.
Hey. Hello.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Welcome. You've jumped in the middle of a heated Wayland RDP debate or discussion.
Yeah.
Not really debate.
I figured
Wayland...
I had to get in because I was ready to fall asleep with all the Wayland talk.
Yeah, it has
So does that
nothing
mean
to
you're
do with
here
him
to
being
change
in
the
his
subject,
mid-60s.
Steve brought coffee to wake people up.
Pretty
Yeah,
sure
so-
that wasn't
reporter.
coffee.
No,
Fine, Steve.
Oh.
What's your contribution then? Let's hear it.
no, I mean, I get everybody wants the new kid on the block, the Wayland and that. As an average user, and I still consider myself an average user. I do a lot of things in Linux and that, but I don't do this really highfalutin stuff, right? I just want to be able to be on a computer and use it. And as long as I get in there and work and like OBS works and, I don't have to do any workaround. I use NVIDIA on my main computer. I have no problems on POP. I'm not having any problems kind of using and testing out VanillaOS. I got Peppermint installed, the news Peppermint. So I got 3 different kind of setups going and they all work for me. I don't have any problems things going in and out, and I'm not looking to change that, to move on to the next thing. OBS works for me. The stuff that I need for my stream works for me. And, I'm not sure. Adam is, is a special use case. You want, of
course he is.
Everything works well as, it's what he wants, and that's fine. We people, if they're coming in and they're going to think about Linux and they hear all that stuff, it's like, okay, right out the door again, because it's not aimed at them.
When you use the term highfalutin in a Linux context, I just imagine people typing on Vim with their pinkies out.
This is the saloon, though, right? So that's kind of an appropriate phrase.
Yeah. So that's all. I mean, I go into the OBS Discord to see what's new and what's going on, and in the Linux support, I'm not sure what all these people are looking to use, or it's like everything is harder. They make everything harder for themselves. I kind of don't get that. But if it's that's just the way I feel. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Wayland or getting better or wanting to run what you want to run. That's absolutely fine.
I'm happy people get excited when I get excited, but recognize I just want to let everyone know I use a computer like a super nerd. I'm building my own images from GitHub, for Christ's sake. So don't take anything that I tell you. If it sounds cool, just be prepared for pain. I think it's cool, but that's me, man. So it represents apparently, because no one here runs Wayland, I represent nobody. So
That's not true. I'm on Wayland. I've been on Wayland for
thank
years,
you.
But
Thank you.
but
You
I
made
run-
my night.
But I run GNOME, and so
That's
I
fine.
realize that's probably the other unusual part about most of the people that most other people that I know anymore that are on Linux are run KDE for some reason, and I'm the unusual one that's been on GNOME for most of the last 20 years. And as a result of running GNOME, I've been on Wayland for I don't even know how long now.
Excellent.
And Wayland and GNOME have worked for me flawlessly for I don't even know how long. I don't know when I switched.
What kind
And
of video card do you have by any chance?
what is this? This is a RT or RX 590.
Okay,
AMD.
so you're AMD. Yeah.
It's an AMD. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's been
And you
flawless.
haven't run into anything then personally in any of that amount of time. And I guess
No.
if you've been using it that long, like you just would have already found a way around it anyway. So
Yeah, and I mean I don't play a lot of games, but I game off and on here and then. And my kids used to play a lot of games on this system for the first year or so that we had it until they got their own.
I don't think gaming
Windows
is an
boxes.
issue on Wayland. I think Wayland actually does gaming quite nicely.
Yeah.
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 What about you, Steve? Are you running X or are you running Wayland? Or do you even know?
On Pop, it's X.
Okay.
On Peppermint, it's X. And I am not sure about Vanilla. I'm going to assume it's X. I think, yeah, we looked at it, didn't we, Adam, the other week? It was running X probably because of NVIDIA installed.
And for what it's worth, Adam, my husband is also on Wayland, and he's on a crappy old laptop with Intel graphics. And
You guys are doing the Lord's work. Keep it up.
yeah, and as far as I know, he has zero issues.
So based
Otherwise,
on
he would complain to me. But
so Wayland represents 15% of this panel. So that's a significant percentage of computer users. 15%.
Just remember, the top 1% owns 90%. Just saying.
It's tough because like when I'm on Wayland, I feel it. Like
Really?
whether it's GNOME or Plasma, it's so smooth and it feels like I'm working in the future. How the windows like resize and like how smooth it is. And then I use KSnip and I start crying again because I use KSnip so much for work, for mock-ups and stuff like that, and write-ups and editing things and screenshotting things. And it's just a little rough on portals.
You know, and I as you say that at first I was like, really, but you know what, you're right. I went back and I forget what it was that made me use X, why it was that I ended up in X on GNOME a few months ago. And it drove me crazy just how stuttery and sort of awful it felt.
Yeah.
And
So Steve, don't go to Wayland because once you like
No.
it, it's gonna be hard to.
Right. Yeah, I prefer my desktops and not mimic Michael J. Fox. I
Right?
do like a smooth desktop, yeah.
Oh man. Oh.
Ooh.
I could
Oh,
imagine though that if you were so used to that smoothness, and I'm trying to think.
It
of
makes it
thing.
way worse. It's like going from 60 to 30. Like
Yeah.
30 by itself was fine until you saw 60. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You can't go back. Yeah.
No, you can't. Once you get used to Wayland, you cannot go back to X. It's pain. And no, that's, yeah. I think I was testing something, and I don't even remember what I was testing, but I was testing something and switching to X and to Wayland and to multiple different desktops, and was just like, oh my God, this is awful. I can't live here. I have to go back to Wayland. This is just painful.
I'm glad someone understands why I said earlier that like X is just not even an option for me anymore.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
I totally understand it. I was very sad when Wayland was just too herky-jerky for me and kept crashing, and I just couldn't stay there. So I understand it, but like the smoothness of Wayland, yes, it's very pronounced. It's almost like indescribably smooth, and it makes me a little bit sad.
And screen sharing when on Chrome gave me problems still on Wayland, on GNOME. So when I use it for work and I couldn't show my desktop, it was just black screen. I was like, okay, I can't. And using Flat Seal, I was troubleshooting with Flat Seal and I got like a little better, but then I couldn't pick the monitor. It was always like the oddball monitor to my right. And I was just like, I can't. I gotta use X. So that's why I'm back on X. But I'm every time I get there, I stay on Wayland a little longer for that reason.
Yeah, basically,
Right.
if you have to do anything modern, you just can't use Wayland.
Yeah, I just use a Mac for that. Like if I need to get actual work done, I just use my Mac.
All right, the Michael J. Fox comment was the line, but what you just said using a Mac is way too far.
Look, man, if the boundaries never get pushed, then we just stay in place.
In the chat, Jeremy Smith says, way too many desktop window managers and GTK, Qt, etc. nonsense. I gave up on that a long time ago. They all keep trying to reinvent and replace themselves over and over and over, and it sucks. He had multiple use. And I'm not going to disagree. I think a lot of it's the need to create, the need to do something. When something doesn't satisfy whatever it is that you need, somebody tries to fill that with a thing, whatever that might be. I think GTK was a response to the very early the threat of Qt becoming closed source, and so that's what spurred GTK in existence, and
Right.
And so that's no longer an issue.
Well,
because if they do, there's that clause, and then it would really hurt Qt.
yeah.
So there's just kind of like that the sort of Damocles hanging over them, I guess. So
I
anyway,
think just to quickly answer that.
Sure.
I think it's easy to get caught up on seeing things like that feel like they're just reinventing themselves for no reason. But as somebody who has built solutions in the past and then later built other things and looked back at what I did and like, man, if I could go back and redo that, I know like a way better way of doing it now. That's kind of the idea. Like it
Yeah.
seems like they're just reinventing
That's true.
themselves, but they're just reevaluating the way they did it before based on like modern things and new ways of doing things. And they're like, we can do that better this way, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a matter of just like, I just want to, it's not just churn, right? It's like reevaluating your paradigms, reevaluating your
Right.
methodologies.
Well, it's both, too.
It's the old know better, do better thing.
Right.
As you learn to do things better, you do them better. And what you didn't know 5 years ago, you couldn't do.
Correct.
So,
right. And like when moving from Qt 3 to Qt 4, there's a lot of new functionality and different ways of thinking how the desktop component should interact. While in Qt 3, it worked, but it was kind of a band-aid on top of an existing system. With Qt 4, they built all that stuff into the structure, the framework of it to accommodate for these different ways of passing information. And now Qt 5 is a revision on top of that has streamlined a lot of it. And then I don't know what Qt 6 brings. I think it's not really a big change, but it is a change. So, but yeah. And then you have and there's other toolkits too. There's that EFL for like the Enlightenment, and there's I think Motif is gone. I'm pretty sure at this point. So, all right. Well, I think do we beat the Wayland X11 thing to absolute a pulp? I think so.
for now.
And yet my Michael J. Fox joke is fun. It was bad, but you're gonna bring in violence. I see.
Well,
I missed that comment. What was it?
well, let's not repeat it.
Good.
Can we say like Squiggle Wiggle Writer instead? Is that better?
Squiggle Wiggle Writer.
Do
Sure.
you not remember those? They were like little like vibrating pens that were just like it made it look like you had bad handwriting by default, even if you had good handwriting.
Oh, I never had
Yeah.
one of those.
Yeah, they were dumb.
Yeah, but what if he had bad handwriting and used it? Would it make it better?
No, just make it that much worse. It only went in one direction.
Unless you vibrated opposite, like your badness, like was an opposite to the squiggle wiggle. Because I imagine it probably had some little weight in it that spun around. That'd be the easiest way
Can
to
you
do
give me
that.
an example of someone who could use that, Nate? Who could benefit from
No.
that?
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
it's
I wasn't
possible,
sure.
right? It's like
I wasn't sure.
it's as possible as shaking a box of Legos and expecting them to all
No
form together.
individuals that come to mind that could benefit from vibrating in the opposite direction.
Maybe Steve.
Okay, just checking. Steve could benefit from a lot of things. Yeah.
I have horrible handwriting.
Scrap, you put this in here as a subject to talk about. I think we'll go ahead and push that up because it's very timing good, I guess. Apropos. So Twitter forces non-Twitter Blue users to cancel SMS two-factor authentication. And
Yep.
I've never actually used two-factor authentication with SMS. I'd use it very sparingly or not at all. because I don't trust SMS two-factor authentication. I prefer email or using some sort of like an authentication app, like Microsoft has one.
Google.
Google has one. I think also Bitwarden has a two-factor authentication option. I think
Right.
if supported. So
And LastPass has one.
yeah,
The cool thing, the reason I brought it up was put it in the thing was because it was causing such a fuss on Twitter. It trended, and people were mad. It was hilarious. It's like you're mad about being told to use something more secure than SMS.
Right. And but the funny thing is that the only way you can use the least secure version of two-factor is by paying for it.
Yeah, stupid, but whatever. We'll monetize the whole thing regardless, and we'll accuse the opportunity to teach people, right? So it's a good opportunity. And I saw some comments in there because when something trends, what was trending was Google Authenticator, not something about Twitter's 2FA. I was like, well, let's see what this is all about. And I saw a bunch of posts that were people losing phones where they didn't have access to that phone and that authenticator was gone. There was no backup for it. There was no cloud backup for some reason. And so it's like, well, let's talk about this. What authenticator apps have a cloud backup? What's a nice secure option? Are you writing down your codes? Are you using multiple forms of whether it's KeyPass or LastPass or Bitwarden where you're putting this stuff? How do you guys go about this, and what suggestions we can come up with?
Well, Bitwarden to me, I mean, they were one of the first that had, two-factor, what do they call it? Something like timed path. Yeah, when I realized they had that, because I had been using and I had that exact same problem, Scrap, where the phone that I had, something happened to it and I lost some codes that I didn't have backed up, and I was just kind of screwed. And so when I realized that Bitwarden had that, I was like, oh. And a lot of people decried it as being like, well, if they get into your account, then they've got your authorization too. And it's like, okay, well, you can't win then. If I use a strong password, I just or use a physical key if you're that worried about it. But it's so convenient to have two-factor in Bitwarden, because you autofill your password, and in the background it automatically copies the code into your clipboard. And so you log in, the next screen comes up and it says enter your code, Control V, boom, you're in, you're good. That's really clean and easy for me, and it does it on mobile as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would be a very sad person if Bitwarden went away.
Does KeyPass XC have that, Mark? Do you know?
It does.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious to know if that, because I know a lot of people here use KeyPass XC as a password manager that they keep locally.
I was just gonna say the advantage of KeyPass XC outside of anything is that over something like Bitwarden is it can also interact with desktop applications. So if you have logins for a desktop application, and also if you have the type of password in a browser where it pops up another window, like it's a browser function, you can't get past it. Password managers don't work with that, but KeyPass XC does work. So I forgot to mention that last time we talked about it. So.
Yeah, I didn't know that. The my concern about using the clipboard to pass your password, I would be worried that, is the clipboard an encrypted thing, or is you just lose that after?
You can tell it to delete it from the clipboard within 10 seconds, 5 seconds,
Okay.
Those codes also, once you've logged in, they're one time, and once that timer goes out, it auto generates a new 6-digit. So.
And they only last for like 30 seconds anyways.
Yeah. TOTP was what I was trying to think of. Thanks, Scrap.
Yeah.
Timed one-time password.
There you go.
Yeah, they only last for like 30 seconds, and then they reset to something else.
Yeah.
So.
Nothing's perfect. It's definitely, there is, I'm sure, if you had a keylogger or like some kind of something on your system that was monitoring your clipboard, in that short amount of time or something, like it's possible. But the convenience of using something like Bitwarden to me outweighs that very, very unlikely chance. So.
Mhm. Well, I don't use a computer that's not mine with Bitwarden. Like I wouldn't do that. I would have that on my. Although, I mean, how secure is your Android phone? I suppose that might be, if that can be hacked and monitored, you're kind of in a bad spot too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking like high-end state level hacking stuff, then yeah. But I think the average person doesn't really have very much to worry about.
Your best bet is just to harden yourself as much as possible. That's if someone.
Well, and you also, so like you can do another thing with Bitwarden. I'm not trying to make a commercial for Bitwarden, but and a lot of these features probably aren't specific just to Bitwarden, but it's what I use. You can set a double authentication for certain logins. So like for your bank login, just because Bitwarden is authenticated already on your desktop, let's say, your browser's open and the add-on is already logged in, you can add a second hit authentication, second touch authentication, where if you go to load that site and log in, Bitwarden will pop up another login screen asking you for your master password. Mm-hmm. So unless they have your master password, they can't get to that. So that's another thing that that it handles. So
is that one of their premium features?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've been using premium for so long that I don't know. It's $10 a year. It's kind of
okay. There's no excuse. I should be paying that.
Okay. It's and I figure I want to support them. And even though my $10 a year doesn't go very far, I can imagine. I think it should be more expensive, but yeah, it's so cheap. But yeah, I have to look and see what that is called. But I think you just go to an entry and you say require additional password or something like that.
Yeah, I think I have to look into the two-factor authentication using Bitwarden. Maybe make some of my stuff a little more secure besides using email, which I know that could be also snagged as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's called master password reprompt. So if you go, excuse me, if you go to any of your entries and edit it, if you scroll down a little bit, master password reprompt. And so anytime you try to use that entry, it's going to ask you for that password again.
I mean, that would be a good thing to just look into just because we should probably have like a security best practices episode at some point in time. I'm just throwing these ideas out there to see what sticks, what people actually like.
Store your passwords in an FTP server and hit them with Telnet. Simple.
That sounds great. No, I actually pay for I pay for Bitwarden too. I actually pay for the families or org or premium, whatever that is. But that's because I have kids and it is 100% worth it to not deal with their passwords anymore. And yeah, that has made my life so much more gloriously freeing to not be asked, Mom, what's my Xbox password? Mom, what's the Netflix password? Mom, what's my Gmail password? It's the best thing I ever did was pay $40 a year is 100% worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter just put so on Android, you can do a screen, like a design, and she has that on her tab. Yep. And there is no way to get rid of that thing on an Android device. Like there used to be a way,
right?
And they took it away because it was being abused. And now, and I keep telling her,
you're talking about like the pattern thing, like the like line thing you make.
You can't even get in there's nothing you can do unless you know that pattern. It's outrageous.
So just tell her she's gonna play a new finger painting game called Brute Force, and like she can just sit there and make lines until eventually unlocks.
So we've been doing that, and now it's up to 30 hours between tries.
But like, so you're just training her for like Facebook gaming, right? Like you want another try, you'll pay $5, right? Like,
yeah, it's crazy, and I'm unfortunately faced with a situation where there are programs out there that supposedly will unlock it for like $50 or something.
But then they get your
the data, right? The point is to get the data off of it, and she's got, videos of herself. She's got, and it isn't hooked up to Google Photos. She's got, drawings that she. It's a pen tablet, so she's got all kind of artwork she's done. Like, it's a bummer. It's really sad,
Yeah.
But I keep saying, why did you do it? I don't know. I'm like, why did you change it? We knew what it was. I don't know. Okay, well,
How
what
old
did you
is
make
she?
it? She's 11.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
Yeah, I think what it was is she probably figured out that she could do it, and she was just playing with it to see how it worked, and accidentally, and I
Set
said,
it as
but,
the default. Yeah.
well, but I
Right.
just said,
And
honey,
you can't wipe it, right? Because like
No.
you have to have that to wipe it, right?
Well, no, you can wipe it, but then you lose everything. So it's, yeah,
Well, that's the lesson, right?
Well, that is the lesson, sadly, So it's, why did you play with that? You shouldn't have played with that. And now,
No. The lesson is pay more attention. Encourage her to tinker and do things, but
Oh,
make
yeah.
her pay attention, right?
oh yeah, no, I don't have
So
a problem with that.
So she forgot her patterns, right?
Yeah.
Yep, she changed it, and you have to. It's not like you just do it once. You have to actually verify it. So she did it twice. She knew what it was when she did it, but now she can't remember.
Dang
And
it.
her and my
stinks.
wife have been just trying, every time it lets them. And it started with like 2 minutes. You have to wait 2 minutes. Then it was 5 minutes. And I have to wait 15 minutes. Yeah, they're up to 30 hours. So I don't know where it goes from here.
Dang it.
32.
No, it'll be like 48 or something crazy. So.
Oh wow, that's quite a jump. Well, all right. So next week we are doing the distro exploration of CentOS. So kind of keeping things. If you listen to the most recent episode of Linux User Space, they give a great background and so forth on the turbulent history that is CentOS and how it came into existence. So I do recommend you check that out. It's a great episode. It's a lot of fun. And so next week we're going to bring our experience with CentOS to the panel, to YouTube, whatever, and see how it goes. I haven't used CentOS since before stream, so this should be fun.
I used CentOS a couple times. I tried some of the Linux Academy stuff a while back, and they use it for their online laboratory where you log in remote and whatnot.
Okay. And what do you
And-
think?
I thought it was great fundamental teaching tool. I'm gonna grab an ISO and throw it on something I've got laying around here and bang on it. See if it still works the same.
What were you gonna say, Mark?
And we're going to specifically evaluate stream. Is that right?
Yes. CentOS
Okay.
Stream 9 is what they did on Linux User Space, so that would be what I'll do. But if you want to do something else crazy, go for it. And Mark, you do how Mark wants to do this, because I think it's always interesting to see how you test things out, because it's always different than everybody else, and I like that. It's however you want to use it. Okay. Someone's being
Not
funny.
as desktop.
So Joseph DeGarmo says, no $OS? No, we don't have that kind of funding here. That's not something we have.
That would be a Leviticus distro, like Kaboom OS.
All right, so we do have a Linux Saloon calendar. You can go to linuxsaloon.com or cubiclenight.com/Linux Saloon, and so you can actually get our get the live schedule, what the upcoming shows will be. If you want to do that, so you always know if sometimes the times might have to shift left or right a little bit on the schedule, and so you can get the up-to-date information if you have that calendar, because I will update that. All right, and is Ben still around? I mean, he might have fallen asleep at the computer for all I know.
No, I'm here.
Okay, just barely. So if you'd like to give us a StormOS update, you said that you are doing, you've got some KDE things fixed. Everything's wonderful.
Yes. Well, I noticed that there was some calamari settings that I had to fix. I had to, so I pushed those up to GitHub, and I then rebuilt the ISO, and I'm about to test it by installing it on a VM or another machine of mine, and I will report if those changes have fixed the ISOs, and then we should be good there. So now I noticed that also the welcome app was also loading at the same time as Calamari's. So I found a way to fix that as well. And I also rebuilt, so I had to rebuild the XFCE as well. So everything should be okay for now. And I also added a bookmarks app or script that my buddy Seeker made. And then, so that's really the only changes that I've made, other than the theme is Arc Black Ice now. Still the same surf and icons, but other than that, like I said in the last topic, I will be changing to how to having the panel at the top and the dog-like plugin at the bottom, and then other than that, it should be okay for a good while to come. So yeah, StormOS is going to continue to get better, and then we should be good from there.
Well, excellent. So how did you come upon the solution?
Well, our buddy Rick Koppel told me via downloading it and testing the KDE ISO that it wasn't installing properly. So I checked Calamari's, my KDE config, and compared it to my XFCE config by opening it in Mousepad and checking between the two files. And because I noticed that I had accidentally merged the XFCE and KDE configs into one for the packages thing, so the packages module. So I took out the XFCE portion and just left the KDE and the KDE config, and it was fine. So hopefully, so after we conclude this topic, I will be checking on my Legion laptop to see if it installs properly. And if it does, then we're good to go. So, yeah.
Well, excellent.
Yes.
I'm glad they haven't fully dumped the
I
KDE.
will state, like I stated earlier this morning, that this has an Intel AX Wi-Fi chip in it. So I don't know how good that will perform, because I know Adam here has said that it's not a very good Wi-Fi chip for Linux, and that is true. So I'll have to bear with that because I don't have a decent.
Can I pause you right there?
Yes, Adam.
Hit up power profiles, man. Put that thing
Power profiles.
in performance mode. You'll get good Wi-Fi. That's what happened to me.
How do I install that, Adam?
Go first, open up a browser, go to apple.com/Mac. No, I'm just kidding.
Good
It
Lord.
just depends on the distro. Just hit the
Arch-based system.
RTFM, dude.
I'm gonna look up Arch power profiles. Hold on. Arch power profile. Okay, so
I want to do that after the show, man.
all right, thanks. Well, anyway, I'll look up. Yeah, I'll get with you about that after the show. It's fine. Anyway, yeah, so that's a bit of news on StormOS, and we'll keep all the new stuff coming.
Excellent. I'm glad you're still cranking away at it.
Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention, I am also currently working on a Gen 2 ISO for this, so keep your eyes peeled for that.
That sounds like a lot of extra work.
Yes, but I've decided that, I want to offer an alternate option for those that, want to get their feet wet more with Linux. And so keep your eyes out for a Gen 2 offering sometime in the near future.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate giving us an update on StormOS. I wish you continued success.
Thanks.
All right, so it is that time. That's last call. And I would like to find out, Steve, I think I know the answer to this, but tomorrow, is there a coffee clash happening?
Yes, there is.
Excellent. And what are you going to be talking about?
Some of it's going to be about me using Zoom to stream to YouTube.
Oh, okay. Like directly?
Yep.
Or
that's what I did on Wednesday.
Well, sweet.
And I'll plug in and use screen copy and plug in the Android and walk through it. And then I've done some little changes in that to the stream or to the OBS setup. See if anybody notices tomorrow.
Nice. Are you still gonna have that epic music, that wait music?
You bet. You bet.
Excellent. I cranked it up really loud yesterday, last week, and my kids complained, so it was perfect. Mark,
Good.
the Atlanta Linux enthusiasts, are you still meeting on Sundays?
Yes, we meet every Sunday. We meet online at using Jitsi, and it's at 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern, and we're on there for 3 hours. There's no set agenda, but we do try to stick to answering your question, and we try to have answers for your Linux topics and open source. So everyone's welcome, and it's a little bit smaller group. You can bring your problem. A lot of times we like to have you share screen, and then we can help you with commands. So if you want to find out more, go to l.org. The link's in the chat, and anyone's welcome.
So you can share your screen as long as you're not running Wayland. Linux user space. Check that out for CentOS. I think they have a live show coming up. They have another show dropping Monday, and then they have a live show coming up Tuesday, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken.
Are they actually going to do a makeup from last week because it was Valentine's Day? Oh, wait, it was the anniversary. That's right.
Well, whatever it was. Yeah, Leo, that is you. So typically, after show releases, then they have a live recording right after that. But I think last week, they had some complications. Leo had some complications, but he always has some kind of complication. And but anyway, so check it out. LinuxUserSpace.show. You can get the schedules there. They also have a Discord that you can join. You can find out more there. So LinuxUserSpace.show. I am part of a podcast called Linux Out Loud. I have one fantastic co-host, Wendy, and then there's Matt. So we actually did our live stream today for the show. We couldn't do it Friday because of complications, because these things happen. And we talked about fun little Linux gadgets that are surfacing, as it were. So it was a fun show. You can check that out. It'll be released Wednesday, right? That's when we're doing it? Yeah, released Wednesday. And if
Yes, I'm not sick this week, so it should actually drop on time instead of late. Well, I'm still sick. I'm just not as sick.
right, you're on the mend.
That's right.
Yeah, I edited the last one. I was up late on Tuesday working on it until I sent it to you. So good
Yeah,
times.
I was asleep.
I have a website called keepgoinglate.com. I do things. Maybe check it out. Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network. Check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank you all for your support, however you do it, being a part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting, on the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts personal back into personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yous.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Uh,
Yeah.
Ooh. It has many distributions. Anyway, but with me, oh man, with me today, I'll make sure I cut that out. Woo! Yeah.
So just keep at the immutable stuff. Your lips will flame. Time one-time password.
He froze.
Password or time code or something.
You froze there for a second. It glitched out.
And yeah, of course, because it's Zoom and it hates me. So sorry.
Don't you think
The
there's
advantage of.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
If people have slowness from either my Google Drive or SourceForge link, they have the torrent option as well.
a torrent of digital fun?